from them. Then they sent them back to the rear. Then we start on through. Every now and then there's shots come in, there's mortar. And I'm probably here too because a lot of the mortar shells were duds. They probably had a lot of people working forced labor, sabotaging some of their ammunition so it wouldn't explode. I'm here to tell you that to hear it come breaking down through the woods and it not explode, that's like a Christmas present. And but they weren't all like that. We come to the edge of the woods. It was getting along in the day. And there was another big opening, and you could see them over there. And they saw us. And when they was waiting to see us, there come the barrage of mortar shells in. They kept saying, duck, duck. I don't know how much farther you can go once you duck. It's the ground there below the snow. But when the shell hit, it splattered the lieutenant's shoulder, and they were using anti-tank, concussion shells instead of anti-personnel. That's why I'm here talking to you. The explosion is downward with some outward, where an anti-personnel is like a hand grenade. It explodes and out. So it felt like someone had taken a flat board and hauled off as hard as he could and hit me in the side of the face. That's the way it felt. And I had it ringing for 2 or 3 days. I answered the phone and no one would say anything. No, that's thrown in there. But a little later, when it eased up, a tank was there. And the lieutenant had this wound there in his shoulder. And I was helping get him on the back of this tank, and me and another guy was going to help hold him on. I haven't been hit or anything. Someone is. Now, the assistant squad leader, my assistant squad leader, come up, says, either one of you two hit or hurt? Like a nut. I said, no. He said, well, get off. I'll hold him. Now, I'd heard he had a bad case of battle fatigue, which it's bad. But he was with him and went back. Now, when he did, I was the last one in our squad left that started out that morning. And I got with one guy that was with a mortar. I was the last one in the machine gun squad. And then the guy with the mortar squad was there. So we started digging in on the edge. And all of a sudden, the guys started walking by. And I said, you know, they were talking German. And a little bit after that, well, we heard some shots. A little bit after that, they sent a runner up, says you need to pull back. You're about a mile ahead of everybody else. That was nice to hear. Yeah. So when when you're digging in, most guys know where the next guy's digging in, because it wasn't right next to him. So the guy that knew where the next guy was, he went down to tell the other guy to pull back. Me and the other guys, there was 2 guys, stayed here, and the runner, he took the message on. So finally I said, you know, I was way ahead of my time and smart, even though I was young. I said, you know, we should go ahead and go on back now instead of waiting. They're not going to come back over here and all go back together. So they agreed. So we went back. Time we got back there, they thought it'd better move out of there. That's where the tanks were parked. We crawled on the back of the tanks so they could take us back where the half track was. See, we were a mile ahead. We were probably about a mile or so ahead of our half track. So it had become about 2 miles or so. And we get on the back of these tanks. I'm hanging on my rifle, and it's cold. And when we got back to the half track, I reached for my rifle, but I already had it. I didn't know it. And I jumped off there, got off the tank, because right there is where the foxhole was we used the night before, but I'd be by myself. I tried to get my hands in my pockets to get them warm, but they wouldn't go. I liken it like if you bought a big, long thing of bologna and it had fingers on it, you just take it and try to stuff it in your pocket, you can't do it. They were frozen because all that cold wind against you. And I finally got my gloves. They're just dress gloves. They didn't even give us, well, you know, this is a side issue, but they asked Eisenhower what he wanted, winter uniforms or gasoline. You can read this, and he wanted gasoline. So I never was wet from here up. I had a field jacket impregnated against water and had a long coat. But down here I just had an OD, which was Class X type of uniform, which was just the same as almost as dress uniform. And
so not very thick.
No. And then my boots had the galoshes over on them, which didn't protect you against the cold. But that was a side issue.
How were your gloves? Did you have gloves?
Little brown things that were dress gloves. They weren't packs or anything, but they're better than nothing. So I got them off, tried to get my hands in my pocket, and I couldn't. But I finally got them in there and get them warm, or put them under my arm or whatever. But I mean, it's hard to tell you how cold it was out there. But one night we come in, my buddy and I, instead of digging a foxhole, we hadn't done a foxhole yet, we just laid our stuff out under the backside of the track and pulled it over us once we hadn't frozen to death that night. But anyway, the tanks went on, so I was back with the tank driver and the assistant squad leader, one that said, "Get off, I'll hold him." And me, that's all that was there. So I went in the foxhole to get ready to lay down. He told me I'd need to set it to 50 caliber guard for an hour, in about an hour. So in about an hour, when it was my turn, I got out. My pants are just like I just walked out of a swimming pool. Laying in that snow all day and all the cold, it just freezes. But up here it was all right. So I was sitting there behind the 50 caliber, just on the alert. Then I was relieved in an hour for some other people. Went and got back into the deal, sopping wet again. The next morning when I got up, the pants were like they steam dried. They were dry. And that's what you go through day in and day out, and thankful you're alive. But after that day, and we'd lost so many, they said we need to pull back into Luxembourg to get replacements. See, they had 3 units, 2 up and 1 back, or 1 up and 2 back all the time. So we must have been the 1 up and 2 back, or what, this is the way their system which works. Anyway, about the middle of the next day, they decided that we'd pull back in the Luxembourg. So it was just me and the assistant squad leader and the track driver went back, stopped at a little town called Hassel, Luxembourg. And we got to stay in these people's house overnight, and they kept a fire going. and I got to sleep with my combat boots off and just my socks. And the next morning when I woke up, tried to get my shoes on, my feet were twice the size as they were the night before. I couldn't get them on. I just barely could get my galoshes on over my feet, not over my combat boots. So I hobbled down and got a hot breakfast where they had their deal set up. And then after that, I ate, I come back. I was trying to clean my rifle on these people's dining table, hobbling around there, and this, things work for me, like I told you. This assistant squad leader said, "Turner, what's wrong?" I said, "My feet hurt." I said, "I can't get my combat boots on. I mean, they really pain." He said, "You go to the medic." He gave me an order to go to the medic. I would have waited another 2 days. I would have probably lost 2 or 3 toes. But I went down there, left my rifle all apart on these people's table. As far as I know, it's still there. And the first one they looked, and they sent me back to the next aid station. There they took my galoshes and wrapped them with gauze, and sent me back to another one. And from there, they had what you call a 104th Field Evac Hospital, huge tent with guys on litters. And from there, they had one of the military ambulances pick me up with some others and took me to that tent. And I don't know, getting ahead of myself or not. But anyway, the idea was, after seeing them, I was worthless to be out in the snow anymore.
Did you have frostbite?
Yeah,
What happened?
severe frostbite.
Yeah.
But I didn't know. I was fortunate, except for getting slapped on the side of the face with, and
all this time you're part of the 4th Armored Division, is that correct?
Company C, 53rd Armored Infantry Battalion. And they scheduled me to go on a train back to Paris after they got my weapons and hand grenades and all that, so they don't send that back. Mm-hmm. And when we got to Paris, I was there about a week at what they had made a nice building for a hospital.
Was this after the Battle of Bulge was
No,
over?
it's still going on. No, it went on
Okay.
till they got it cleared out, at least another 30 days, and then from there on.
So you were sent back, was this like January of 45?
This would probably be about the second week in January. Then that was from the front. Mm-hmm. Then after a week, then poking needles in me, and they couldn't feel it, they decided to send me to the UK, as they call it, the United Kingdom, that's England. So I was flew back to southern England. And there I was in the hospital at least a month or 6 weeks. They kept checking it every day and this and that. So I was still a litter case when I showed up back going by the Statue of Liberty. It took 11 days on an old ship that every time the wave come, the motors would come out, the propellers would come out and shake. But it was going in the right direction. But I didn't walk as such for another 2 or 3 weeks after they sent me to Fort Sam Houston, Brooks Convalescent Hospital, Fort Sam Houston, Texas. Then they gave us some kind of therapy. They'd give us a straight jigger of whiskey of a morning which didn't drink. This other guy, a little older but younger, he stepped up the counter. The nurse gave him his, marked it off, gave me mine. He downed his, I downed mine. Oh man, it's like swallowing 2 lit matches. And I headed for the drinking fountain. From then on, I'd sip it. But I didn't do it very much unless they forced me.
That was for the pain?
That was to create new capillaries so that a lot of this stuff got froze off. It was to make new capillaries.
They're trying to increase like the circulation?
Yeah. I've got a nice, interesting story to tell you later, but it was embarrassing, but I'll tell you. That had nothing to do with that. But anyway, after I was at Brooks Hospital, there about 3 or 4 weeks, then they determined, well, they called me over. They sent a runner over to call me over to headquarters. They checked, they said, well, Turner, we're checking your points. It looks like you like 1 point getting out. They had a point system. So many points for overseas service, for civilian, for your medals, and things like that. And at the end of that, it looked like I had 1 point. That's a downer. So I went back over to the barracks. And about an hour later, they sent a runner over, says, Turner, they want you again back over at headquarters. So I went over there and says, well, we've been figuring, looks like you've got enough points. You know, they probably didn't give me credit for my Bronze Star or my Purple Heart or whatever else. I had 2 stars for the European theater, all that, you know. And anyway, in less than a couple hours, I'm on a train coming home. That's a good feeling.
Was that in July?
No.
That was a little earlier?
No, well, yeah, but I'm getting ahead. Let me go back one more. First I got a convalescent furlough for 45 days. I come home, enjoyed that life. Then I had to go back. I still didn't know what it was going to be. So they called me over and wanted to know, well, when I got to get this story in. See if things worked for me. When I got when I got back from home and the train station, I was walking to where we catch the bus to go back to the hospital. And as I was walking, it was still dark. It wasn't real dark, but it's still dark. I could look up ahead for some here, the house next door, across the street. There was 2 guys standing, leaning against this column. And they separated. One stayed here. The one went up into this area, sort of alcove. I thought, man, that's weird. You know, I was still on the front. That's weird. I thought, this is what I thought. When I get up there, I go as close to the middle of them as I can. I should have turned around, went back to the train station. But I didn't. I walked right on through the middle, went on down. About a distance of a couple of these rooms, I heard this running. I dropped everything, turned around, I was ready. They lost their surprise. They peeled off. And I saw a place, and I went in that had coffee until it got daylight. Now, I didn't think too much more of it. But the next day, when I was at the hospital or Fort Sam Houston, they was giving us orientation and said, now you'll probably be getting passes to go into San Antonio. Says, when you do, whatever you do, do not be on the sidewalk of a night by yourself. Says, every night an American soldier is killed in San Antonio. Every night. they thought I had $200 or $300 on me. See, they thought I was getting out of the service. They didn't know I was coming back. You get your first 100 of your mustering out, and they get your back pay settled, which is nothing. But I didn't have anything but $20 or $30. I'd been on furlough. That would have made them mad, if nothing else. But see, I could have been dead. That wouldn't have been a shame. No one would have known it. I'd just come back from the snow.
Yeah.
But something was working for me, just like that assistant squad leader. He said, "Turner, what's wrong?" I just told him. He said, "You go to the medic," because I got off of the tank when he got on, and I didn't get killed in training, like they said. If he couldn't, it worked out. And anyway, when they said I could come home, then I come home. In a couple hours, I was on the train coming from San Antonio to home. And I come in, it was early in the morning, carrying my duffel bag. I stopped by the post office then. My brother was working there. I thought I'd better stop and tell him to call Mother so it wouldn't startle her. And he did. And I went on down. It's just a block away. And then I'm going to get to a good, funny deal. Well, it's not that funny. There was a young girl that I dated off and on. I wrote letters to. I even had a picture of my helmet.